there are two types of control. One you can see, touch, and taste: communism, fascism, dictatorship like apartheid in South Africa. You know that you're in a dictatorship. That has a finite life, because when people know the situation they're in and they can see their controllers, then the desire for human freedom, it may take some time, but that desire will eventually overturn that control. The greatest form of control is dictatorship you cannot see, the prison without the bars, as I call it, with the facade of freedom and this farce called democracy, which is ludicrously connected to the word freedom when it is anything but. And this covert control leads people to sit in a prison cell thinking they're free because they can't see the bars, because they appear to be free, but appearance is all that it is. So when you had this apparent explosion of freedom around the world, when the former colonies were given independence, what actually happened was dictatorship they could see was replaced by dictatorship they couldn't see, far more potent, far more effective.
The time has come for the world to move in a new direction. We must embrace a new era of engagement based on mutual interest and mutual respect, and our work must begin now.
And the president outlined his vision of a new world order in which the US would participate fully, one rooted on 4 basic principles:
non-proliferation and disarmament, the promotion of peace and security, the preservation of our planet, and a global economy that advances opportunity for all people.
Among the speakers that followed the US president, the leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, speaking at the UN for the first time after 40 years in power. And waiving the UN Charter, he called for an end to any permanent membership of the Security Council, arguing that small nations should have the same rights as the big. It was a speech that lasted well over an hour and covered subjects ranging from jet lag to political assassanations.
And then the assassination or the killing of Kennedy in 63 or 62, the President of the United States of America. Why? We want to know who killed him. Somebody who, by the name of Lee Harvey, and then another Jack Ruby killed Lee Harvey. Why did he kill him? Of understanding and hypocrisy created to 65 wars after the establishment of the United Nations. The preamble states also that if there is a use of force, then there must be then it must be the United Nations force, or the United Nations military interventions, according to the joint ventures of the United Nations. Not country or 1 2 country or 3 country using the force or the military power. The United Nations, all of it, will decide to go to war to maintain peace and world security. And if there is any aggression by one country against another after the 45, after the establishment of this United Nations, if there is any aggression against any country, the United Nations altogether should deter and stop this aggression, and should check this aggression. I mean, if a country, any country, Libya, for instance, makes an attack against France or aggression against France, then the whole United Nations should check the Libyan aggression against France, because France is a member state, independent state in the United General Assembly, that is a sovereign country, a member state of the United Nations, and all of us that we have to protect the sovereignty of all nations collectively. But 65 wars, aggressive war, took place without any actions from the United Nations to stop and check these wars, and 8 fierce big wars, and victims of these wars amount to millions, made or initiated by the countries who.
Of course, there is no question that Libya
and the world would be better off with Gaddafi out of power. I, along with many other world leaders, have embraced that goal and will actively pursue it through non-military means. But broadening our military mission to include regime change would be a mistake. The task that I assigned our forces to protect the Libyan people from immediate danger and to establish a no-fly zone carries with it a UN mandate and international support. It's also what the Libyan opposition asked us to do. If we tried to overthrow Gaddafi by force, our coalition would splinter. We would likely have to put U.S. troops on the ground to accomplish that mission, or risk killing many civilians from the air. The dangers faced by our men and women in uniform would be far greater. So would the costs and our share of the responsibility for what comes next. To be blunt, we went down that road in Iraq. Thanks to the extraordinary sacrifices of our troops and the determination of our diplomats, we are hopeful about Iraq's future. But regime change there took 8 years, thousands of American and Iraqi lives, and nearly $1 trillion. That is not something we can afford to repeat in Libya. It may not happen overnight, as a badly weakened Gaddafi tries desperately to hang on to power. But it should be clear to those around Gaddafi and to every Libyan that history is not on Gaddafi's side. With the time and space that we have provided for the Libyan people, they will be able to determine their own destiny. And that is how it should be.
Well, to discuss the events in Libya, I'm now joined live by Anthony Weil. He's founder and chief editor of the online newspaper, The Daily Bell, joining me there in Zurich. Well, we hear a lot about the anti-Gaddafi forces, but we actually know next to nothing about who they are. What do you make of them? Who do you think are their leaders?
Well, the leaders, there's quite a bit of speculation as to actually who is pulling the strings of what's happening in Libya. For example, the UK Telegraph recently ran a piece which talked a fair amount about the Alliance for Youth Movements, which is an effort that was formed in the United States by Jared Cohen, who was the former top advisor to both Condoleezza Rice as well as Hillary Clinton in the State Department, and he, along with the support of the State Department, formed the Alliance for Youth Movements and their affiliated website called movements.org. What's important about this is that that organization has as its stated mission, along with several multinational corporations who sponsor the organization, its mission is to provide a conduit, a training, so to speak, platform for instruction of how to organize and prepare for, let's say, electronic-driven protests or communications revolutions like the ones we're seeing driven in Libya today. And there is a heavy footprint involved in both the sands of Tunisia as well as Egypt and now in Libya with this organization. So there's a direct tie-in to the U.S. State Department here. As a matter of fact, in 2009, Hillary Clinton gave the keynote address speech in Mexico City for this organization. So that would be an example of a foreign organization that seems to have some leadership influence on the ground in Libya.
You say...
You know, I don't think he's going to be able to survive. You know, his financial means have been severely hampered here. If there's a no-fly zone instituted by NATO with the U.S. Standing off the shores and the British with warships ready to move at any time, I think the muscle is being flexed and the message has been sent. I don't think Gaddafi's going to survive.
We have a responsibility to act. That's what's happened in Libya over the course of these last 6 weeks.
And what's happening in the Middle East, Alex? I'll put the picture up on the screen. That picture is of countries that are, and there are more, that are targeted to be taken over by the NATO, European Union, North American cabal. And when I say that, it's not the British doing this or the Americans doing this. It's being done through those countries using those countries, but actually the American government and the British government and the French government with also Sarkozy and stuff, they're just satellites of this global cabal. They're not representatives of the people of those countries.
They were captured by the banking cartel many centuries ago, many of them.
Yes, they were.
They're engines.
They're vehicles, and the governments of the world, the vast majority of them anyway, and they want to make it all of them, are actually like transnational corporation subsidiary companies of the global, company, and they carry out the orders of the centrally dictated headquarters of this network, and that's why, as you pointed out earlier, we're seeing the same things being introduced in countries all over the world at the same time. This is how it's done. And if we look at that map, first of all, it's worth looking to the right, where Somalia and Ethiopia and a place called Djibouti, just across the sea from Yemen. That is the African base of AFRICOM. Now, what the American military, and the American military too, is just a satellite military of the global cabal. They call it the American military, but it's not. It has all that money spent on it, fantastic amounts of money. So it basically spends more money on the military, America, than the rest of the world.
Well, notice the French have now invaded via NATO the Ivory Coast and are backing the rebels slaughtering people. This is AFRICOM moving into Africa.
Exactly, but the reason so much fantastic amounts of money are spent on the American military is not for the benefit of the American people. It's because that is at the moment the main point of military imposition for the cabal. And of course, Britain being one of the great centres of the cabal, not the British government, but the City of London, etc., it's always in the slipstream of America when it goes into a country. So from AFRICOM, it was created during the Boyd Bush administration, and the question is, why has America got an African command? Well, it's Africa. Well, the idea is to pick these countries off, and Zbigniew Brzezinski, in his book Grand Chessboard in 1998, he said that the key area to control the world is what he calls Eurasia. And Eurasia is basically Europe across to China and then down into the Middle East. And what we've seen, Alex, over the last many, many years is that process of picking off the key areas of Eurasia, and now they're moving into Africa. What they want, for a start, is to take the whole of those North African countries over, Morocco, Algeria, Libya, Egypt, where, of course, they've had the trouble. There's now protests in Jordan and Syria. They're the target countries too. They've got Iraq. They're in there. And then, bingo, there's the big one to the right of Iraq, Iran. And then they're already in Afghanistan. They're totally coldly destabilizing Pakistan, and then just off that map you're hitting the Chinese border, and these countries are being systematically targeted. And what they're doing in the Muslim world is playing off the divisions going back, goodness me, tell me it's not true, to the 7th century between the Shia Muslims and the Sunni Muslims. And the reason that Saudi Arabia and people like the United Arab Emirates are being allowed to go into Bahrain and create and commit terrible atrocities to suppress the people's rebellion in Bahrain, and been allowed to do it with no reaction and no condemnation while everything's targeted on Libya, is because they want to play Saudi Arabia, that is overwhelmingly a Sunni Muslim country, and others around it. They want to use them in their targeting of Iran, which is really the center of the Shiite Muslim world. It's dominated Iran by Shiite Muslims. And so if they get Iran...
There's a new documentary out that says that Osama bin Laden is living in Tehran. Is Osama bin Laden in Tehran?
Your question is laughable.
Why?
The U.S. government has invaded Afghanistan in order to arrest bin Laden. They probably know where bin Laden is. If they don't know where bin Laden is, why did they invade? First, they invaded. Then they tried to find out where he is. Is that logical? Do you think this is logical?
What I think is that you didn't answer my question. Is he in Tehran or not?
Our position is quite clear. Some journalists have said bin Laden is in Iran. These words don't have legal value. Our position towards Afghanistan and against terrorism is quite clear.
Is it true or not?
Maybe you know, but I don't know.